In this lesson, we'll learn about finding probability. Probability is a mathematical way of measuring how likely it is that something will happen. If I have a two-sided coin, the probability that we receive a head is 1/2, or 1 out of every 2 times. And the other possibility and possible outcome, and I'll give you that definition in a little bit, is that you might receive a tail, and the probability that you receive a tail is 1/2. Now, we call the heads and the tails that they are both equally likely then, since they are both 1/2 there, that those two possible outcomes of either a head or a tail is equally likely. And that's when we're talking about a coin. We're talking about the probability. The probability of a head is 1/2. The probability of a tail is 1/2. We call those possible outcomes equally likely. An outcome is a result of a probability experiment. So again, when I flip that coin, my two possible outcomes that I have are that it's either going to land on a head or it's going to land on a tail. And so those outcomes are either a head or a tail. Let's take a look at a 6-sided die. A 6-sided die, the possible outcomes for a 6-sided die, and a typical die that you have, is that it has a chance to land on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or even 6. So the possible outcomes, the outcomes that are possible are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. There are 6 possible outcomes for that die. Taking a look at that same situation, we can also talk about the probability or the chances that the outcome will occur. Each of those chances is expressed as a fraction, where the denominator of the fraction is the total number of possible outcomes. There's 6 possible outcomes there. That's why the denominator for the probability is 6. And then the 1 only occurs and is on one side of that dice, and that's why the probability of a 1 is 1/6. The probability of a 2 is also 1/6, as is the probability of a 3, as is the probability of a 4, as is the probability of a 5, and is also the same for the probability of a 6. You'll notice that those probabilities do add up to one whole. 1/6 plus 1/6 plus 1/6 is 3/6, plus another 3/6 is 6/6, which is one whole, which describes all the possible outcomes. Here we are given a spinner. And if you think about those possible outcomes, we've got blue, green, purple, yellow, and red. Those are our possible outcomes. How many possible outcomes are there? Did you say 5? Because there are 5 equally likely possible outcomes. So we could get blue, green, purple, yellow, or even red for one spin of the spinner. Each of the probabilities, or the chances that those would happen, is the total number of outcomes is in the denominator, and we would have the number of blues or greens or purples or yellows or red in that numerator. And so in this case, if we're just looking at blue, the chances or the probability of that occurring is 1/5. Let's think about drawing marbles from a bag. And so for one draw from the bag, we have some possible outcomes. Now, it looks like we have blue, we have red, or we have green as our possible outcomes. So I'll go ahead and write that down. We can either get a blue marble, a red marble, or a green marble. Now for the probability of the blue marble. To express that as a fraction, we have to count up the number of marbles in the bag first. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and that number there is going to be in our denominator. Next, within our numerator, we have to see as to how many blue marbles there are. So our probability is 2/6. Now, when we're writing a probability, we are really supposed to express that within simplest form. So 2/6 is equal to 1/3. So we'll express it in that manner there. For red, and for that red marble, there are 3 red marbles there. That's why we express the probability as 3 out of 6. 3 out of those 6 are red. And so that's the probability. 3/6, if we divide the numerator and denominator by 3, we get that equal to 1/2. Finally, in looking at the green marbles, within the bag, there's only 1. So 1 is going to be our numerator or denominator. Right, our numerator, and our denominator is going to be 6, because there are 6 total marbles. So again, within the denominator, that's the total number of possible outcomes there. There's 6 different marbles within there. You might get confused to say, oh, well, there's only 3. There's blue, red, or green. But because there's more than one of each of those, there's 6 possible outcomes, and that's why it is 6 possible outcomes. You could draw this first red marble, or maybe even the second red marble, the third red marble, or the first blue one, or the second blue one, or the first green one. And that's why it is there's still 6 within for that denominator. 1/6 is already in simplest form. So now we've listed the outcomes and those probabilities. Okay, it's your turn to try. Choosing tiles from a bag, chance that you will pick an odd number. Now, I'll go ahead and just walk you through this here. You tell me what the denominator is going to be. What is the denominator going to be? Right, 5. Because there are 5 tiles there. What's the numerator going to be? The chance that you pick an odd number. How many possible outcomes would there be where it is that you pick an odd number? What could you pick? You could pick either a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 5. And the favorable outcome, where it is that this is true, is only for an odd number, which would be 1, 3, or 5. How many of those did I just circle? Right, 3. So our probability, or our chance, that you will pick an odd number is 3/5. 3 out of 5. A favorable outcome is the result you are looking to find. Here is an experiment. Roll a die. And here's a question, where you will be trying to figure out a favorable outcome. So the question is, what are the chances of rolling a number less than 3? The possible outcomes, there's 6 of them, that you could roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Our only favorable outcomes are 1 and 2, because those are numbers that are both less than 3. So our denominator is going to be the total number of sides of that die, or 6, and the chances of rolling a number less than 3 is 2 out of 6. Now again, we should be expressing probability in simplest form. So the chances of rolling a number less than 3 are 1 out of 3, or 1/3. So the probability can be expressed as a fraction, where the numerator is the number of favorable outcomes, and the denominator is the total number of outcomes. So for our typical coin, 1 is the number of favorable outcomes for either a head or a tail, for that matter, and the total number of outcomes is 2, because you could either have a head or a tail. So the chances of a head is 1/2. And our 2 outcomes are head or a tail, with our favorable outcome being a head in this particular case for that coin. That's all you need to know about probability. Well, at least to start with.